Good afternoon. Welcome to the City Club of Cleveland. My name is Jim Foster, and I'm Executive Director of the City Club. I'm very pleased to introduce today's program, Pets Gone Wild, in partnership with the Cleveland Zoological Society and ideastream. The trade in exotic animals is a multi-billion-dollar industry. Nationally, more than 5,000 tigers are kept as pets and in roadside menageries, more than exist in the wild. The issue of dangerous exotic pets in Ohio came to a climax last fall, garnering international media attention as a Zanesville man tragically released his exotic pets before taking his own life. A community came to a halt, schools were closed, and local law enforcement turned their full attention to protecting the residents, resulting in the death of a number of animals. In October 2011, Representative Debbie Phillips of Athens introduced a bill in the Ohio House that would ban ownership of certain exotic animals. As the debate on exotic animal legislation takes place and heats up, the community has been introduced to many of the issues surrounding exotic animals. Our panelists will help provide a comprehensive picture of the debate over exotic animal legislation. Nationally known animal advocate Tim Harrison, the founder of Outreach for Animals, had his time as a police officer that introduced him to the complexity of exotic animal ownership. Cindy Huntsman is with the Ohio Association of Animal Owners, a membership organization with over 10,000 members in Ohio. Its mission is to protect the rights of animal owners and aid in setting legislation and regulation and educating animal owners about their responsibilities to animal care and public safety. Doug Peikarts serves as the Vice President for Planning and Conservation Programs for the Akron Zoo. He is also an instructor for the graduate program in zoo management through the George Mason University. And Steve Taylor is Zoo Director for the Cleveland Metro Park Zoo. Mr. Taylor has been outspoken in supporting an effective statewide ban on private ownership of exotic animals. Moderating today's debate is ideastream health and science reporter Ann Glausser. And now, Ann Glausser.
Thank you, and welcome panelists.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here. We're going to start off. The panelists are each going to give about a 2-minute, and I'll try and keep my eye on the clock for you guys, a 2-minute overview about the topic we're going to discuss today on exotic animals and legislation in the works. And then we'll go into a discussion. So the panelists have agreed on an order, and we are going to start with Tim Harrison on the end here, animal advocate and rescue expert, as you heard from the introduction.
Thank you for having me here. It's a very pleasure to be here at the City Club. The main thing I am is a human/animal advocate. I'm just not for animals, I'm also for human beings. As you see in the documentary, I'm the subject of The Elephant in the Living Room. It's a national and an international award-winning documentary. My main goal is to keep private people that have no experience keeping dangerous exotic animals in their homes. Sounds like common sense, but as we know, common sense isn't that common anymore. You can buy a tiger, but you can't buy common sense. So the whole sad part about this is I've lost 2 friends over the last 8-year period. One was Michael Peterman from Dayton, Ohio, a Dayton firefighter paramedic who was bitten by a rhino viper in his own home and died from that snake. I had to go back in and catch that snake out of his house after he died. And I also lost a friend, Ted Drees, who was a gentleman from Cincinnati, Ohio, who actually was constricted to death by his 13-foot Burmese python. The sad part about this is these guys should have known better to be around these animals, but if they weren't there in the first place, we wouldn't be having the problem we have now. Same with the Zanesville situation. People say, Tim, that's a freak incident. Well, if you see the film, The Elephant in the Living Room, you'll see the beginning segments talk about it right there. They have 2 African lions, full grown, loose on the interstate on Pike County, Ohio, and international news, of course. They were attacking cars. Well, ask the Sheriff Travis down there, what he felt about that. All the other organizations out here that combat me say, hey, Tim, there's no public safety problem. Take it from a police officer, firefighter, paramedic for 29 years in the state of Ohio, instructor for EMTs, emergency room doctors across the state and the country, and they also teach for Homeland Security at Texas A&M College, a disaster city, which is Enhanced Unified Command for Weapons of Mass Destruction and Terrorism. We teach governors, mayors, government officials, as well as fire chiefs and police chiefs from all over the country, and they all have stories. We'll talk statistics later when somebody else brings that up, because we'll show you why statistics can be turned and why people are not getting the whole information. but I think my 2 minutes is just about up, but I appreciate you having me here.
Great, thank you. And now we're going to turn to Doug Piakosh. There we go.
Absolutely. My name's Doug Piakosh. I'm currently the Vice President of Planning and Conservation Programs at the Akron Zoo. I'm here today not only representing the Akron Zoo, however, I'm also representing the Association of Zoos and Aquariums. Pat Simmons, the CEO at Akron, is also the chairman of the board of directors for the AZA. I've served the association in many ways over the last 20 years, including as a species survival plan coordinator, a taxon advisory group chairman, and as you already heard, as the course administrator for a graduate level program that investigates and also develops excellent exhibits at our member institutions. One of the things that I'd really like to point out is an offering of many thanks to the brave and tireless work of both law enforcement and zoo officials from the Columbus Zoo and the Wilds for their compassionate and professional handling of the unfortunate incident at Zanesville. AZA itself represents 225 professionally managed and accredited zoos and aquariums which draw over 175 million visitors annually. We believe that AZA-accredited institutions are the leaders in animal care and welfare, conservation science, and conservation education. And in fact, 8 of these accredited institutions are right here in Ohio. The African Safari Wildlife Park, Akron Zoological Park, the Cincinnati Zoo, the Cleveland Metro Park Zoo, the Columbus Zoo and Aquarium, the Boonshoft Museum of Discovery, the Wilds, and the Toledo Zoological Gardens. Based on our member institutions' unparalleled experience in dealing with over 800,000 wild animals every day, the AZA firmly believes that dangerous wild animals cannot be properly maintained by individuals without the necessary resources or knowledge to care for them. Wild animals have very specific physical, behavioral, husbandry, health, and nutritional needs, which could rarely be met by individuals who possess these animals solely as pets. These powerful and unpredictable animals should only be maintained by qualified experts from AZA-accredited institutions, where the curatorial staff and these facilities have the requisite knowledge and experience to meet the behavioral and physical needs of these animals and are trained to deal with the inherent risks. In addition, these facilities have the resources to provide for the long-term care of those animals. We are very happy that Ohio is now considering joining other states in our union in passing a state of Ohio legislation piece in order to govern exotic animal ownership in private hands.
And we'll talk much more about that. Okay, thank you. And now we're going to move to Steve Tyler, who's the director of the Cleveland Parks Zoo.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. There are about 18 to 25 states that have complete bans on these type of dangerous exotic animals. There's another 11 or 12 that have policies restricting ownership. Ohio has nothing. Well, a few health laws, but literally has nothing, and it's time for us to have a law. I believe that people shouldn't have these dangerous exotic animals as pets. As we saw very clearly from the Zanesville situation, there's a danger to human beings. We've also, if you watched any of that, you saw that it's an animal welfare concern. And if you read the paper this morning about the snakes in the Everglades, there's also a huge environmental concern. So there's many reasons to ban dangerous exotic animals from private ownership. Cleveland Metro Park Zoo, we have 53 keepers. We have 9 or 10 curators and assistant curators. We have 2 veterinarians. We have 3 vet techs. We have 2 people that just keep records of our animals. We have a food bill and other veterinary and other animal care things of $800,000. Dr. Lewandowski's sitting over there. He has a lab budget of about $50,000 and a pharmaceutical budget, which is used for animals, by the way, of about $80,000. That's a lot of money. You know, and I don't think we do a good enough job sometimes taking care of our animals. Can you imagine what it takes if you're a private owner and have some of these animals? And that's why we're for a ban on dangerous exotic animals in the state of Ohio.
Now we have Cindy Huntsman. She has a farm in Ohio, and she's also a representative of the Ohio Association of Animal Owners.
Yes, thank you very much. I'm here today to represent the Ohio Association of Animal Owners, and they have been around for about 22 years, helping animal owners in the state of Ohio maintain their animals through education, as well as physically helping them in time of need. We do whatever we can to help them to be educated in the maintaining and the animal husbandry of their animals, and try to answer their questions as well as help build facilities for them and the keeping of their animals. What happened at Terry Thompson's facility was something that was catastrophic for the animals and for Terry and Marion. And I'm sure no one wants to see that happen again. But I don't think banning is the answer. I think education is the answer. I've been at it for 30 plus years. I've actually physically raised exotic animals, and I still do. It's something that is a passion for me every day. And I don't know how many of you in here have ever raised even a dog or a cat, but it's something that becomes your way of life. And for us that are part of the association, it is our way of life. To maintain our animals, at our farm we have over 200 animals. I don't have the budget that these two gentlemen have, but my animals are well cared for. They eat before I do every day. They are part of our environment. They try to maintain themselves. We have worked in the last 20 years with Jack Hanna on different TV shows like Maury Povich, Good Morning America, David Letterman. They've been featured in many magazines like Cosmopolitan, Red Book, different articles, different photo shoots. They just traveled to California and did a Hyundai commercial. These animals don't maintain us, they maintain themselves. At least they try to. And it has become a way of life for ourselves and for the other representatives of the Ohio Animal Owners Association.
Great, thank you. Thank you to everybody for your statements. And so I want to talk now. I want to sort of take us back to the incident last fall in Zanesville. And I understand that Tim Harrison, you were there. You drove down there. Can you tell us what happened?
I don't know for the exact facts of what happened. All I know is Terry Thompson allegedly turned his animals loose, cut the wiring in the cages. I did see the wiring was cut, and then he did something to himself to make the animals approach him. Then he blew his brains out, basically. Very sad situation. And all the animals were loose, 18 tigers, 17 lions, grizzly bears, baboons, everything was loose. The sad part about it was that they were actually into almost like a feeding frenzy around him. It was almost like he set almost a booby trap up for the first law enforcement officer to pull up there because he couldn't get to him. The police and the rescue have to get to him to make sure he's still alive. So he called for help, the first officer. They got there. Now you got to remember, you're talking Muskegon County. There's no dart rifles. There's no training for this kind of stuff. I went through the police academy, Ohio State Patrol Academy. There's no training for police officers to handle dangerous exotic animals, period. Nothing for fire departments and very little for paramedics to deal with some of these venomous snakes and things of that nature people have. So they had to come in that situation, and they did have to put those animals down, basically just to get to him and to protect themselves. One officer had a grizzly bear come around, full grizzly bear come around, and he had to pull his sidearm and had to shoot it and dropped 7 feet from him with his sidearm. That's a very dangerous situation. But it was a rainy night, it was dark, it was cold, and there was really nobody else that called for help, and there was really nobody coming to help out the law enforcement and the paramedics. So they were stuck into a bad situation. They had to do it. There's no dart rifles for counties around there. So, that just was a bad situation.
Right, and then that's a situation where nearly 50-some animals were shot and killed.
Actually 49. 48 the first night and one tiger the next day.
Right.
And they did find a monkey and one of the lions later on.
Right. Now, Cindy, you were mentioning that you know Terry, or knew Terry.
Very well.
Right.
Terry Thompson and Marion, we considered them friends of my husband and I. And 4 years ago, Terry got into a bit of a situation. Terry had been a federal firearms dealer for many years. And he got into guns because he was in the Vietnam War. and it's something the government had trained him to do. And Terry suffered from post-traumatic stress disorder, which probably no one knows that. And when the federal firearms charge came for Terry, it was very devastating for him. And he went off the deep end, so to speak. And he kept it together as much as he could. My volunteers and I went down and we rebuilt the whole facility. Terry and Marion paid for it. And when we were done that summer, it would have met a federal inspection. We had guillotine doors, we had slide cages, we had taken some of the animals to our facility to house them temporarily while animals' cages were being built. After that, Terry went off the edge. He was like a hoarder, so to speak. He got more and more animals, and we tried to persuade Terry not to do that, that it wasn't in the best interest of the animals that he had, it wasn't in the best interest of the animals that he was getting, or for him or Marion to be able to take care of everything.
Now I want to interject. I want to ask you, Doug, do you think this was an isolated incident? Like, is what happened in Zanesville something that could happen again, or was it just an isolated incident?
Unfortunately, it wasn't an isolated incident. What was unusual about what happened in Zanesville is the scale of it. To my knowledge, it's the first time that an exotic animal owner did something like this. What we've faced over the years are, as you've heard earlier on from the panel, there have been big cats reported missing and or loose on highways. There have been large reptiles that have been discovered loose in backyards or under homes. There were a variety of different things that happened all through these years, and there were a number of maulings. I mean, 2006, Rachel Suplee, Southern Ohio, a bear that was in an animal farm that she didn't even know existed next to her, got loose. Her daughter went out into the garage, went to open the garage door to let out her dog, and reportedly, in testimony she provided to the State House, she saw a large brown head come underneath the garage door. She reportedly screamed, slammed the door shut, went in the house. The bear came through, knocked that door down, ended up attacking her mother. And the bravery shown by this 15-year-old girl who discovered it in saving her mother was the only thing that prevented that bear from killing her mother. But her mother's been mauled now and has reportedly never been the same. These situations happen with sometimes a scary resilience. We hear about them every couple of years at minimum, sometimes multiple times a year. And the biggest issue is sometimes you don't hear about them at all. So what we currently believe is the track record could be dramatically greater than what we've heard about so far. And I know Tim has a lot more that he can say to that.
But I want to interject here. I want to, because right now it's getting a lot of attention, both in Ohio and nationally. And one thing that people have been really shocked by is, after hearing about Zanesville, is that Ohio is one of, I think, 7 states that is very lax on regulations. And now there's a proposed bill that would ban casual ownership of exotic animals. So I want to ask our panelists their view on this, but I'm wondering, Steve, maybe you could give a crack at sort of outlining what this proposed ban would entail.
Well, there's legislation that could have a permit process. There's legislation that certainly would allow sanctuaries. In fact, I'm a big proponent of sanctuaries because we're going to need them to take in these kind of animals. But Tim just told me he thinks a recent survey showed there could be as many as 60 places with over 20 dangerous animals. So that's a lot. That's a lot of animals. I think, again, I don't know there's a good reason for people to keep these type of animals in private hands. But right now they're still discussing what legislation is going to be moved forward, and I'm sure there'll be public testimony.
Tim, do you want to?
I just want to say, just back up what Doug said here. It's very simple. A lot of things don't make the statistics. Just ask your local police officers or the wonderful people out here working with animal controls. They're the ones that see it first. It's always the cops. It's always the firemen first, animal control. It's one of these situations like this here happened in Dayton, Ohio, has made no statistics about anybody from the Humane Society or from the Ohio Association of Animal Owners. It's a mountain lion that was loose in downtown Dayton, Ohio. I had to go catch it by hand. Okay, this didn't make any statistic whatsoever, and this is a CSI picture from the crime scene investigator. We have a series of pictures. This cat was loose for 2 weeks. Nobody believed the woman when she saw it, of course, right? It's just a Labrador Retriever running through your neighborhood, right? So you guys laughing out here working to do these things, right? Well, it turns out this was a mountain lion and attacked the Dayton police officer. I was lucky enough to dog snare it, grab it by its tail, and get it out of there. But the sad part about that is, ladies and gentlemen, it peed all over me, and I felt like doing the exact same thing. This has happened. We're getting calls like this continually, and if you do not believe me, just do what the director did for the Elephant in the Living Room. Come ride with me. And I've begged associations like the Ohio Association of Animal Owners, Rexanos, I've begged them all to come ride with me. Just ride with me for a few weeks. It's all I beg of you, just to see what's really going on with average people out there getting these things in their homes, and they can't have. There's always two victims when people buy a dangerous exotic animal, the person and the animal. And most likely one of you is going to die, and most likely it's going to be the animal.
I want to give Cindy a chance to weigh in here. I know that the Ohio Association of Animal Owners has come out against this proposed bill. Even though you were at in KSIC's working group to establish recommendations for what should be in it. So I'm wondering what is in this proposed legislation that wouldn't work from your perspective?
First off, I would like to ask Tim, that picture, do we know where the cougar come from?
No, we never did find out. Nobody ever raises their hand, can I have my cobra back?
Do we know it didn't come from the wild?
Oh, it definitely wasn't a wild cougar.
It definitely
Definitely
wasn't.
100% was not wild cougar in downtown Dayton. As we know, cougars are not back in the state of Ohio. As you saw in the film, The Elephant in the Living Room, they're selling by the hundreds.
I didn't
the
see
hundreds
the
at
film.
Mount Hope, Ohio. The auctions, they're bringing them out as fast as they can bring them out and auction them off to regular people
But we
on the
don't know
street.
for sure that that didn't come from the wild.
Well, I
They
can
do
guarantee it
live
wasn't
wild
wild.
here in Ohio.
Oh, they do?
Yes, they
Who's
do.
the expert that told you that?
I've read it from ODNR many times. They do live here in Ohio.
Do you know
they live
that-
in West Virginia, Pennsylvania, Michigan.
And you know why they live in West
don't know whether
Virginia?
they're in Ohio or Pennsylvania.
Well, you know why they're living there now? Because they're born free. They've been turned loose. And we do have people actually tell us they turn these animals loose. We have a black leopard now loose in the Dayton, Ohio area that was sold by a local man there, as we know who he is. He sold a black leopard cub. This individual had it on Riverside Drive, and he had turned it loose before he left the area because he was with warrants. This was somebody's pet. The neighborhood, because the people said they saw it in the neighborhood with some individual, but he wasn't there anymore when we went to his house.
People said they saw it. But we don't know for sure if it was wild or if it was captive.
Well, I can guarantee it's not wild.
Okay.
So let's hear your take on the legislation.
The legislation that I've seen so far, and I've spoke to Troy Balderson, who is the senator down in the Zanesville area, and worked with some of the different senators that are proposing the legislation. Education needs to be done with the people who buy. We're not saying that there doesn't need to be some type of legislation because, unfortunately, people don't stop to think before they buy things. People have children every day. That doesn't mean they make good parents. Same way with animals. It doesn't mean that they can raise that animal. But they buy dogs and cats every day, and they don't realize what they're getting into. It doesn't mean that we have to ban. The banning of exotic animals and giving sole priority to an AZA facility holds really no accountability. A USDA licensed facility, which they have to be before they can become an AZA facility, gives accountability. I'm not saying from the OAO's perspective that we want that to be part of the criteria, that you be USDA licensed, but I think they need to take a broader look at what they're doing to see that it encompasses a whole lot of different people. And it's easy for someone here to say, let's just ban it and get rid of it. But you have to look at the broader picture. You have to look at the animals themselves, the people who actually raise them and work with them, and there is somewhat of a problem with people turning them loose and not being able to take care of them. But banning is not the way to get around it.
And can I, Steve, you have a response?
No, I just want to, as I understand it, to the USDA, you have to understand, they only license exhibitors, and it doesn't really prohibit anybody federally from keeping these animals and selling them, as I understand it. And I think that's pretty. So USDA is certainly not the answer, because I don't think Terry's place was a USDA place. The other thing is, we're talking about, and some of us have used the term lightly, exotic animals, and this particular legislation is just dangerous exotic animals. People can have parrots, people can have snakes, people can have ferrets. There's a lot of exotic animals people would still be able to have under this current. Well, it's all your lions and tigers and bears, oh my, poisonous snakes, elephants, rhinos.
I say lions and tigers and bears, oh why?
Yeah, right, exactly. So it's really the big dangerous animals. And there's a whole list that's proposed, and Cindy was involved in creating. There's a pretty big list, but we could read it all, but it's really the dangerous ones.
It's the ones you have to shoot as a police officer.
That you may not actually have weapons to take out.
Yes, that's correct. That's very correct. It's with the elephants, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I want to ask about something that I was unfamiliar with before this story came out, the idea of an auction. So I want to ask this question, and I'm not sure who wants to jump in here, but where if I were interested in getting an exotic animal as a pet, where is that animal coming from, and where's Tim?
The auction. I'll say, okay, yeah, Animal Finder's Guide is a newspaper with classified ads actually giving away cougars. There's so many of them, people breeding in their homes, giving away tiger cubs, giving away bears. But the thing is, there's a Mount Hope used to have the biggest auction probably in this part of the country, if not in the country. And it shows, just look at the crowd of people when you see it in the Elephant in the Living Room, the mock documentary. It actually shows a crowd of people. It's not one kind of person that are buying these animals. It's all kinds, everybody from doctors to teachers. And they bring everything out. And she was asking, cougars, there's no wild cougars in these areas. These are people's pets that have been turned loose. And if you don't believe me, if you get 100 cougars a year sold or given away, where do you think they're going? Because the zoos are not going to take them. The rescue facilities ain't going to take them back. Trust me, we got 2 rescue facilities out there that sell animals. They have a disclaimer. You have to sign a disclaimer. You can't bring it back. Poor Terry Brumfield that had the 2 African lions in Piketon, Ohio, that got loose on the interstate, he called for help. He called her association, called Rixano. They told her, don't put Tim Harrison on the property. But nobody helped him. As you'll see in the film, we came on the property, fixed the cage, and tried to help him out best we can. The thing is, you can go to any auctions in the state of Ohio or fairs and pick yourself up a bear, as here in Dayton, Ohio. People bought 3 bears at a little auction fair that they had at this little place off the interstate. You can get anything you want. The sad part of it is, we got to stop that, because we were the #1 for the sale of these things across the country. Texas used to be. Yeah, Texas used to be. Missouri was in there too, but Ohio's #1.
For these animal auctions.
Dangerous exotic animals. I'm not talking about geckos and guppies. I'm talking, just like Steve was talking about, we're talking about dangerous stuff that you have to have a gun to stop.
Right. I'm wondering, Cindy, if you can sort of give us an example of a responsible owner of an exotic animal that might be banned under this legislation.
An example of the actual human, or what we would expect of
the human, and what kind of animal they might own, and in what capacity?
I can't pick out any human person right now, but I would say someone that would want to buy an exotic animal would need to do their homework first. Find out what type of care that animal takes, find out what it eats, what it needs to maintain, what it takes in the wild as in captivity. There are some things in captivity that no amount of money can recreate that animal might need. Primarily just do your homework. And the educational part. I'm not here to tell you that everyone needs to buy an exotic animal that wants to buy an exotic animal. I've had people come to our farm and want to buy an exotic animal, and I turn them away.
You do? What?
And I had the NAACP come knocking at my door because this gentleman happened to be black, and he thought he wanted to buy a tiger. And I told him no. I said, you don't have the ability or the capabilities to take care of it, after I spoke to him. And they said it was because he was black that I wouldn't sell it to him. And I told the guy when he came, I said, I don't care if he's purple. He's not going to buy a tiger from me. He doesn't have the resources, he doesn't have the means or the education to be able to take care of that animal.
But there is a type of responsible person that could be, you know, a good owner to these exotic animals.
Yes, there is.
Right. Do you have a response to that?
I want to say that too. Some of these people are wonderful people. Cindy's a nice person. These people love animals, incredible love for animals. That's not the issue. It's just, is this a legitimate use of in many cases, an endangered species and a large exotic animal? And most of us don't think it's a legitimate use.
The other thing that I'd like to point out, this was not the first attempt at legislation for exotic animals in Ohio. In 2007, 2008, House Bill 45 was introduced, and it was looking at many of the very same issues that we're looking at right now. Since that time, at that time, Ohio was second to Texas in both the sale and transfer and trafficking of wildlife. Today, you just heard from Tim, we're number one. That was 2008 that we were number two. So all of this is going in the wrong direction when you're talking about responsible exotic animal ownership. Because if now the volume that we have available here in the state of Ohio is as high as you've just heard, that means there's a lot more people involved in that particular practice and trade today than there was even 5 years ago. At least that would be the logical response.
Is there money to be made here?
Go ahead, Doug.
I was going to say it's fairly clear it's a multi-billion-dollar industry grossly, but Tim?
Yeah, I was going to say, we're not going to lose anything on the state of Ohio either. With these situations come down, because you're in the Amish countries where most of these auctions are taking place, and as we all know, that's like going into an Indian reservation. They kind of have their own little world. We don't get all the tax money. People are coming from all over the country to get animals here in the state of Ohio and leaving when they have the auctions. Just watch the film. The sad part about this is people are getting a wrong idea about this. Cindy's a great person. She takes care of her animals. She's a professional. I'm talking about the people I see on a daily basis that call me and say, I have a chimpanzee we just helped get out of Centerville, Ohio, that should never got it in the first place. And they get a baptism in reality real quick because they don't act like the ones on reality TV they thought they can act, bring them into their homes.
Mm-hmm. So irresponsible pet owners.
Well, what are they learning from? They're getting education from TV and nobody's teaching them anything. Mm-hmm. I agree with Cindy, education is really big.
Right. So what would make this legislation better or acceptable for the Ohio Association of Animal Owners? Cindy?
I don't know that there's any set legislation in place right now. The wording hasn't been attributed yet. It hasn't been defined yet. And I would say that we have to wait and see what the definitions are and what they do come up with before we would have any remarks to say about it.
So what's been proposed now is just an overview, and it's too soon to tell.
It is. It's too soon to tell. And a ban is just not the answer.
Okay. Do we have time for one more? Yeah, Tim?
I just want to say we did have something with Governor Strickland, an executive order that was signed. It was brought into effect. Governor Kasich dropped that just months before the Zanesville incident. That executive order was very clear, very to the point. All they had to do was sign it, and we would have been sitting in a very nice place right now.
Just a quick follow-up. Governor Kasich says he's going to have the strongest legislation of any state in the country. I would maintain if that's not a ban, then it's not the strongest legislation.
Okay.
Thank you. Today at the City Club of Cleveland, we are listening to a special program featuring a panel discussion with experts on exotic animal legislation in Ohio. We will return momentarily for our traditional City Club questions. We encourage you to formulate your questions now and remind you that your questions should be brief and to the point. We welcome all of you here, especially those of you who are guests. We hope you will join the City Club and become active in our ongoing civic dialogue. In 2012, the City Club will turn 100 years old, and there are a number of events planned. To learn more about the 100th anniversary events, visit the City Club website, www.cityclub.org/100. We welcome all of you here and those listening to our live broadcast on 90.3 WCPN or to other broadcasts on WCLV, WTAM, or one of the many radio stations across the country. Our television broadcast partner is WVIZ PBS ideastream. Television broadcasts of the City Club are made possible by Cleveland State University and PNC. Our live webcast is supported by the University of Akron. Thursday, February 2nd, the City Club hosts a panel discussion on Government 2.0 with topics ranging from municipal impact of the current state budget to how to move towards more efficient government. Next Friday, January 10th, the City Club welcomes Amini Jamal, professor of politics at Princeton University, who will discuss democratization and the politics of civic engagement in the Arab world. If you wish to make reservations or to order a CD or a DVD of today's program, please call 1-888-223-6786 or 216-621-0082. We are pleased to welcome guests at tables hosted by the Cleveland Zoological Society and Cuyahoga County Animal Works Society. Thank you for your support. Today is the Ralph David Hertz Forum on Civil Liberties. And now we would like to return to our speakers and moderator for our traditional City Club question and answer period. We welcome questions from everyone, including guests. Holding the microphone today is City Club Program Director Carrie Miller. First question, please.
What are the basic points? What are the basic points of the proposed legislation that is under consideration right now? I mean, just this is the high points of that legislation.
I'm not sure anybody has the exact legislation, but the basic points, as I understand it, and there's, again, I don't think it's been released, but some of the things they're considering. One, they list certain animals that are dangerous. So we've defined the lions and tigers and bears, poisonous snakes. Secondly, there is exemptions for zoos, accredited zoos and certified AZA certified members. There's an exemptions for sanctuaries, and by sanctuaries is different than in a sense of just a private owner. Sanctuary doesn't sell or breed. They take these animals in, care for them to their best ability until they perish. And there could be a system where legitimate owners could register. Now that, and again, there's a series of fees involved in all this and how it's paid for and that kind of thing. That's as much as really sort of anybody knows, because it's still, there's a group of people still working on it before it's released to the public.
And I understand there's a grandfather clause. I understand there's a grandfather clause.
We don't know that for sure. I would think some kind of grandfathering might be appropriate, only because I don't know if indeed Tim's number's right. I don't know what we're going to do with all these animals. So, I could see where there could be. I don't know if it's in any.
Steve had a comment there.
In the current framework, there is no grandfathering. The grandfathering has been taken out in the current framework.
And Tim?
In the executive order from Governor Strickland, we had a beautiful grandfather clause in there. And when we worked with animals like really old chimps, really old tigers that don't have any claws, it's been surgically altered, these animals would stay on their properties as long as they had a safety cage and the public safety department in the location knew where they were at, and emergency room doctors. What upset me with the writing of these laws is that we have no emergency room doctors on that panel to help write that. We have no coroner's office. Just got these coroners. We'd love to speak to the governor. These are the ones that did coroners on the people that died from exotic animals. We have nobody from the police departments on there speaking on the panel. It's really ridiculous. We need the professionals on there that actually deal with this.
Next question.
Thanks to all of you for coming for this important conversation. Cindy, this is a question really for you. This panel's totally stacked against you and your cause, and I feel like that should be acknowledged. But an aspect of this that hasn't really gotten a thorough hearing is there must be some greater good in your mind served by private ownership of exotic animals. And I feel like people should hear that, and I wonder if you could speak to that a little bit.
The greater good for me is education. I actually work with the exotic animals hands-on. I do field trips at our farm, hands-on field trips. I learned a lot with working with Jack Hanna, that the hands-on experience for children is something they remember forever. I can sit and read them a book, and maybe they'll 2% remember what's in that book. If they get that hands-on experience, they remember that a lifetime. And in the 30 years that I've been doing this, I actually have mothers now and fathers come back to the farm and bring their children because they came to the farm when they were 10 or 12 years old. Or I've went to the schools and I do what they classify as enrichment programs. And I do this through my federal license, through my USDA license. Unfortunately, I can't afford to be a member of AZA, nor do I have a gift shop, so I don't think I would qualify to be a member of AZA. But it's something that I enjoy. I've raised my daughter in it, and actually I've had the animals before I had my daughter. She's now 26. She will be our vet someday. She has her first 5 years under her belt, and she's working on her next 3. And then she'll do 2 years of internship, and she will be our vet someday. It's her life. It's what she enjoys. And for most people in the exotic animal industry, which is a billion-dollar industry, but these 3 are part of that billion-dollar industry. They get their paycheck from that industry. Don't forget that. You get money from it no matter what. Your movies, all that stuff makes you money.
When I risk my life?
I risk my life every day, but that's part of what you want to do. That's your choice by doing that. Just like my choice is to work with the exotic animals. And most of the people who get injured or killed by exotic animals, they know that inherent risk. The majority of people who have been injured or killed by exotic animals is the owners of those exotic animals. They know that risk when they take that animal on, whether they've had it for a year or they've had it 10 years. They know that risk. I'm not saying that you people out there should be subjected to that risk. But unfortunately, people don't stop to think before they buy an exotic animal.
Steve wanted to jump in first, I think.
One thing I certainly agree with Cindy, that oftentimes hands-on educational programs are the best. For the most part, and it's not 100%, most AZA-accredited zoos do not deal with dangerous exotic animals in hands-on activities. There are a few exceptions. In fact, one of the things that AZA just did, and it's going to take a couple years, is to ban all direct contact with elephants. And so no longer are we going to go in with elephants. We use protective contact. But most of our zoos use direct contact, and it's a good way, particularly to get to young children, to use animals. But the use of the animals that we're talking about, whether it's a puff adder or a tiger, is probably not appropriate.
Tim?
I want to throw in there, too, real quick. When she says that I haven't made a cent off of any of this because we're a nonprofit organization, but also, who do you think has to go in and get those guys out of the house when they get bit by their venomous snake or a tiger?
You're talking about the owners.
Police officers, firefighters, EMTs, the gentlemen and ladies right out here have to control that animal because now the owner is dead. So the whole thing is we have to start looking at the whole society, the public safety aspect of it. But people have been hammering me for the last 38 years of doing this. There's no such thing as, it's always just a private owner that dies, which is not always true, but is high percentage. But we still have to go get him as paramedics and firefighters and police officers. So we have to go into this, and then they're stunned, like we talked earlier about the officers in Zanesville. They're going to be traumatized for the rest of their lives by that situation they were involved with. So we have to remember there's other people involved with when you bring something like that into your home. You're not just endangering yourself, you're endangering the neighborhood, you're endangering the people that have to come get you because of your decision.
Doug from Akron Zoo, you wanted to?
Yeah, a couple of things. First, we also are a nonprofit organization, so not in that venue as it was just painted. The other thing that I wanted to address is the whole question here is what is responsible? That's really the bottom line. The AZA's accreditation process looks at much more than just a gift shop. It actually goes through all aspects of a zoological park or an aquarium to make sure they have the ability not only to provide the long-term financial resources, whether it be veterinary care, whether it be exhibition, whether it be animal care, whether it be the guest service, so that the education actually happens as people come in our doors and travel through our parks, so that they actually leave an AZA-accredited facility with value built in their mind to maybe one day vote in favor of protecting wildlife. That's ultimately what this is. And when you look at responsibility and you go and compare that to non-accredited facilities, the question that I would ask you all to ask in that situation, is there a clear program of animal welfare that addresses both the safety of that animal, its veterinary care needs, its habitat needs, its nutritional needs, its enrichment needs, both with a complex system in their environment, in the holding area that they're in, so there's some complexity, some choice available to that individual animal. Also ask yourselves, is it set up in the same type of social structure that would best benefit that animal? When you're dealing with primates especially, this is critically important. Primates that are kept in substandard conditions develop all sorts of behavioral problems in relatively short order. And then when you talk about risks, primates themselves as a group provide the greatest risk back to the caretaker and in private hands to their children, to their grandchildren, to their neighbors. You also end up with those sorts of situations spread across many other different kinds of animals. So when we talk about responsible, responsible is more than just education. Responsible is looking at that whole big picture. And I do agree with you on that, Cindy. It is a big picture issue. It's a big picture issue for all of us sitting up here equally.
Another question.
Yes. Thank you very much for the conversation. As an independent herpetology educator for 30 years, I am not opposed to the concept of legislation or permitting. I have serious concerns whether the state is capable of enforcing it. The state right now has problems enforcing captive propagation laws that are already on the books, even providing the information to people in order to be licensed properly. And it's a pretty simple licensing process. And maybe best for Mr. Harrison, but if anybody can answer this, can you tell me, can the state, it's not going to be a permit funded. You're not going to make enough money from the permit funds to finance this. The state can't build a bridge in downtown Cleveland. How are they going to enforce tiger laws?
Kind of jump in real quick. As a police officer, as a person that deals with mayors and governors, and I got plenty of accommodation letters from the mayors here saying that it's easy to enforce once it's in effect. Because now you have a tiger in your backyard, all you have to have is a law enforcement officer, it doesn't have to be animal control, can walk back there and say that's against the law in the state of Ohio. It gives us something to work with too. But as an educator, I give you a lot of credit. We need to educate the children that it's proper places to have these animals. There's proper places for them to be. And we do understand that those 18 tigers that were killed in Zanesville was misunderstood when Jack Hanna got on TV and said those 18 endangered species were killed. They were not endangered species. They're 8th generation Buckeye tigers that have been inbred with Siberian and Bengal. Because I used to be a person years ago that used to raise these things. I know where these animals come from. We just had an incident today, where the leopard was injured or was hurt with that in the zoo. Well, that had congenital abnormalities because of being interbred. We have to understand we can't do this. These are not endangered species. These are 3,400 permitted tigers in Texas. We've had tons here in the state of Ohio. We need to look at these animals and what they are and respect them for what they are.
Does that answer your question of enforcement? Okay.
There are other probably exemptions in the law too, universities, research facilities. There are some other. You don't have to answer, but do you have poisonous or big constrictors?
Large constrictor and not keep anything venomous.
Yeah.
I'm currently licensed in 18 states.
Oh, okay.
We've got another question in the corner.
Thank you again for this great conversation today. My question is that it kind of seems like a no-brainer to me that at least legislation or permitting or even banning should take place. What do all of you think should happen so that advocates can come forward and make some of these changes happen?
Well, first of all, we have to find out what the law is, and we've been told a month away or 6 weeks away. So I know that some of my curators, veterinarians here, have been having meetings weekly so they can talk about the types of enclosures and those kind of things. So I think we're getting closer to having something which will be published and then have public comment. So once it's announced, then the public should really get involved. It's going to be interesting public meetings.
Yeah. One thing, too, is you can start now in your own communities. I came to Cleveland. My partner and I came to Cleveland in 2006 with Donna Brady. We're here, and we got the legislation passed here, regulations passed in your city of Cleveland. I came here and personally helped them do that here. You can do it on your local levels. If everybody does in the city, in fact, somebody from Governor Kasich's office even sent me, Tim, you already got all the major cities, Wilmington, Dayton, you got them all. No, they still just go right outside the city limit, as we found in Columbus, to sell dangerous venomous snakes. Can't sell them in Columbus, meet you out at the rest area, caught them on a fox neck, and we're doing that.
The other thing that I would point out, this situation is full of diverse perspectives. And ultimately, once we see what's been penned, the response and the solution to it is likely to be just as diverse. So we will have a much better handle on that once we have something to work off of.
Well, I wanted to ask about if one of our panelists could put it in a national perspective for us. What's happening nationally with exotic animal legislation? Doug? From the Acton Zoo?
With exotic animal legislation on a national level, there is a general movement, especially over safety issues like what we're seeing here now, where public safety is at risk, or there is a potential for health concerns. You do have groups working in various states in order to go and pass that kind of legislation. But I would actually turn it to Tim for fine details because I know he's very familiar with it.
Yeah, the state of Washington has the most brilliant, I helped them out there in the state of Oregon also with the primates. And the reptiles, they've got a really good set. If you want to get on the state of Washington, get on your computers, check out their laws they have out there, and they just put some things on addendums to it whenever they need to. So it's a beautifully set up laws. But I want to tell you right now, I've traveled all over the country now lecturing and talking because of the film. The whole world, trust me, I got an interview in Paris, France, and London. The whole world is watching the state of Ohio. What we do is going to be a domino effect across the United States of America. And they are watching what we're doing. If you don't believe me, you can pick up the New York Times and read what they wrote about Ohio before the Zanesville incident. They said, this is a exact quote, they should put a fence around Ohio because it's a zoo. Because I had two of their writers come out and follow me around. Just like I beg everybody else to. Follow me around for a couple of days. And that's what they went back and wrote.
This might have been part of what was implicit in some of what you said, but what is going to happen if there was a ban and it was passed? What is going to happen to all of those animals? I heard sanctuary in there somewhere, but does the ban include funding? If the state says you can't have these animals, what's going to become of them, and how are they going to be maintained?
Just to be, we got Tim here who has a good resource into sanctuaries around the United States. Is that enough? It's also going to depend if there's some grandfathering or permitting. If it's a complete ban, and there's not more sanctuaries set up, I don't think we completely have the answer to all that yet. And it's something the state and we all have to consider as the law goes forward.
And real quick, we had... How big it is. That's exactly right. The size of it, can you get your arms around it, as we say in disaster training. 7 black bears were taken out of the state within making that film 1 year and 8 months. 7 black bears, 12 big cats were taken out of state by just Pat Craig at the World Wildlife Sanctuary out in Kingsburg, Colorado. You'll see it on the movie. He didn't get 1 cent from the state of Ohio. He got a donation from Bob Barker. I've got a place, Alpine, California, right now out in California, Lions, Tigers, and Bears, 93 acres were just donated to them strictly for Ohio animals. That tells you where the world's looking at us.
We've got it. You want to jump in? Yep.
Yeah, sorry. When I said that this is a diverse situation, this is another avenue where it is diverse, because the reality is we know the facilities that are registered with the USDA and licensed, we know what animals they have. A lot of this post-legislation will be discovery, because there's many more animals out there in this state than we're even aware of right now. So the expectation would be, once the legislation is written, there's usually a downtime between passage and implementation that allows the government to work through how this is going to operate and where the funding is going to come from. So we, I think as a panel, all of us would agree we'd expect to see that coming once something passes.
We've been talking a lot about what's likely to happen. I'm curious about how we got to where we are today. Why is it that Ohio, through the years, had such lenient, if really no laws, governing this kind of thing? Is there some quiet power base that was fighting every time legislation tried to get introduced? I mean, why do we find ourselves in this situation?
So history of legislation. Doug?
I'll kick this off, and I'm sure we'll go straight down the panel. The idea amongst the accredited zoos that action needed to be taken in order to restrict private ownership of dangerous animals where it actually put the public at risk is not a new thing. This has been something that the 8 of us have been involved in now, at least me personally, going back the better part of a decade. The reality is that the way this works is typically legislation is written, it's offered in the Capitol, and then there are separate pro hearings and con hearings, and then those who have assisted in writing it are no longer part of that process, and a vote is made, and that vote either approves or denies, and thus far, nothing has passed. So
I think the other part of the history is 20, 30 years ago, most of the southern states and western states created laws because they had a bigger problem because of the weather. So it was very easy to have exotic animals. So California and Florida have had laws, and now it's just sort of moving north and more laws. Why North Carolina or Missouri or us don't have one is hard to say. My guess is we'll all have some kind of laws very soon because, as everybody on the stage has pointed out, this thing that happened in Zanesville was so catastrophic that everybody in the world knows it's happening, and there will be laws everywhere.
I want to give Cindy, do you want to weigh in on this question?
Well, I think there are laws that are part of the Ohio Revised Code that can enforce things like this from happening. It's just that because of the funding or the lack of funding through state government, nobody really wants to deal with it. There were laws on the books that could have kept Zanesville from happening. Just no one wanted to deal with it. I myself personally had spoke to the sheriff in that area years prior about what was going on at Terry's and that some help needed to be sought there. But there was no legal intervention. Nobody wanted to get their hands dirty, so to speak. It takes an effort of everyone in the community to stop something like Zanesville from happening if we keep referring to it as Zanesville. I think if Terry hadn't had the monetary problems in life, which is, everybody doesn't expect what's going to happen in life, we wouldn't be sitting here now with the Zanesville incident. He would have been able to maintain with no problem. But unfortunately, we never know what life's going to bring us. So we'll just have to wait and see what they come forth with.
Thank you. And I want to get to one final question here.
So let's say I'm in my backyard and I do encounter one of these exotic, dangerous animals. What should I do?
Run like hell.
Don't run. Don't run.
Threaten they'll follow you.
They'll definitely knock you down. Just take it. That's where I come in at. A lot of times, police departments are the first ones called all the time. It's always the police, and they have to show up and have to figure out what's going on, where to come from, what is it, what we're going to do. We don't have the weapons, like Doug says. We don't have the weapons to take these animals down safely. Years ago in the city of Tip City, back in the 70s, this has been going on for years. I was going to answer another question. It's been going on for years and years and years, and it's just steadily getting worse. It's easy to get. They're legal. They're cheap. And they're easy to get, and everybody wants one. And it's getting easy. You can go to any auction, any place to get them. But call the police department's always the first one, and that's why we need to start training.
Thank you, Tim.
No, don't run. Definitely don't run.
Hide.
Final comment.
What I was going to say is the key thing is do not, as you already heard, duck and run, because large predators are going to run after you. You look like prey. Try to go and get barriers between you. Try to get yourself inside a structure or a vehicle. Do whatever you can to provide distance without panicking, and then get yourself to a safe location.
Thank you. Thank you.
Today at the City Club, we've been listening to a panel discussion featuring Tim Harrison, Cindy Huntsman, Doug Pierkarts, and Steve Taylor. Thank you, panelists. Thank you, moderator Ann Glausser. And thank you, ladies and gentlemen. This program is now adjourned.